This is CXO Secrets, the podcast that takes you inside the mind of business leaders and reveals the strategies behind their success. Coming up in today's show.
I always say to people, when they ask me, well, what are the things that will slow you down when I go into an organization? I say two things: technology and culture. And you have to manage both of those in a way that says, I'm going to deliver as much value as I can. There's a lot of change and there's a lot of advocacy and taking people along with me. So I have to do that in an authentic voice.
CXO Secrets is powered by EDS, going beyond connections. Find out about upcoming C-level events, experiences and insights at edsxevents.com. Dak Liyanearachchi, thank you for joining us on CXO Secrets.
Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
Now, Dak, you are EVP and CTO at NRG. You joined NRG as a CDAO. Lots of letters there, and I'm going to make it my mission today to unpack as many of those as we can during our chat. But first of all, and particularly for the benefit of those of us from outside of the US, can you give us a top line on NRG, please?
Sure. So NRG is a Fortune 500 company. We're an energy company. So we do everything from generation of an electron. So we generate about 13 gigawatts of energy through 24 power plants, all the way through to selling power and gas to either commercial and industrial, so C&I customers, residential customers, and then all the way through to managing that electron in terms of, we have a smart home business as well. So we are in the home as well as providing the power to that home. So just in terms of size of our residential business, we have about 8 million households that we serve. But I'd say that we, as a strategy, have done a lot of acquisitions along that time, whether it be energy companies, retail brands, or a smart home company, as we did a few years ago. And it's a company that has grown tremendously through both organic growth and a number of acquisitions.
So as soon as you mention acquisitions, mergers, acquisitions in particular there, and growth, I start to think of the role that that you would play in that as a CTO and your colleagues as well as CIOs and CISOs and so on. So assuming that you're on, therefore, a transformation journey of some sort, Dak, how do you position yourself? What's your role in enabling and driving that transformation?
Yeah, so as a technology organization, we've spent quite a bit of time restructuring ourselves to support all the different business units that we have. So if we think about the C&I business, the wholesale business, the residential, the consumer business, we have built our technologies and our groups around those functions. So we have in equivalent of a CIO for each one of those business units. And then we think about horizontally things like cybersecurity, infrastructure, corporate systems, enterprise innovation, enterprise transformation, to support our business units. So we are integrated in a lot of different things that the business wants to do, and we pretty much touch all parts of the value chain, as we said, from generation of electron all the way through to the managing of the electron in a home.
Something you mentioned there was about NRG being a technology company. I mean, it would be easy to think of it as an energy company, but really everything is digital these days. So what's your role in enabling NRG as a technology, as a digital company?
Yeah, I think it's, we are still an energy company. I think our focus on digital and technologies increased tremendously with the advent of things like Gen AI. We went on the data journey about 4 or 5 years ago when I joined as Chief Data and Analytics Officer. So building that foundational capability that will allow us to do more with AI, Gen AI. We do a lot in terms of forecasting, personalization on the consumer side. So we have a lot of different teams working across our organization to enable that. And I think the question as we see it across all of those different business units is enabling value and enabling growth through technology, which has led to, David, some of the comments you made earlier around transformation. So really thinking about how, with these newer technologies like Gen AI, rather than thinking about how do I incrementally improve something, how do I think about the future state? So let's take 2030 as an objective. Our organization should look very different. So what does our organization look in 2030? And then let's work backwards in terms of how does technology, whether it's traditional technology, AI, data, enable that future state. And that's the transformation pivot that we're on, which means we do spend a lot more time, a lot more focus on technology and enablement and digital enablement across the organization.
You also touched on it there, your DNA, your data and analytics background as well, and your roles prior to NRG were leading data analytics functions. And I see experience across various sectors in CDO, CDAO roles. And as you say, that's how you joined NRG. Tell me about your move across the boardroom from the CDAO's desk to the CTO's desk, and how that background in data and analytics, understanding that value and understanding its potential, how it remains important to you in your role now and where NRG and where you're going next.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and David, as you mentioned, yeah, I've moved from retail through to hospitality, now into energy, and heavily consumer focused. And the thing for me has been, as a chief data officer or a chief data and analytics officer, I've always sat within the business, not in technology. So my focus is how quickly can I drive change, organizational change, and value through the use of data, and so shifting that to technology. And when I joined as NRG, I was chief data and analytics officer, reporting to the CEO. We were building out those capabilities, and then we decided to bring the two groups together. Now, we still run as separate groups. So there's a chief data and AI officer within the technology group, and then there's technology. But I don't want them to be burdened with some of the things that traditional technology groups would be burdened with. So my focus on that kind of newer chief data and AI his organization, is really around value. The measure of your success, the measure of that team of success, is about the incremental value that you drive through the organization on an annual basis, and they're measured against that every year.
Alongside the innovation roles that you have there, I see you're also responsible for cybersecurity as well. So just talk to me then about the balance between being an enabler of innovation on the one hand, but also being responsible for mitigating risk. Because, if cyber is the function that's traditionally said no, or at least not yet, how do you balance that with the innovation bit? That demand, yes, now, faster.
Yes, it's a good question, and we've spent a lot of time working through that, because we want to innovate, but not at the expense of our customers or our reputation. So we're in many people's homes, so we have to have that trust. We have to have that we have to have that feel that we're an organization that has a high reputation, a high standard of what we do, and so that is something that we will never kind of compromise on. And so if that's our North Star, we will build out capabilities, we'll drive kind of capabilities that may use data, but at an aggregate level that can really drive performance of the organization, rather than maybe getting into individual customers and what they do, and that would be a absolute no. So we try and we do mix that innovation with the expectations that our customers have in terms of trust and reputation. And I'd say the other part of that, David, is we've spent a lot of time in terms of data privacy, and it's not just cybersecurity, it's data privacy, it's cybersecurity, and it's AI governance as well, because the worlds are colliding or overlapping, and we need to make sure that what we build takes all of those, and it's like a Venn diagram for us. So as we think about our data governance and how we do data governance that reports into our risk management, that reports into our board, that we have all three angles covered, not just cybersecurity, in terms of making sure we're doing the right things with data and we're doing the ethical things with data.
You mentioned how the data analytics function, how success is measured, it's value to the business. When you're looking at risk management, however, how do you begin to articulate metrics around that, success around that? Is it far more difficult to put a measure of value on mitigation of risk? How do you tend to talk about that with the board?
Yeah, I mean, we don't put value on mitigation of risk. That's bread and butter for us. So, that's the table stakes. So we're more about the incremental in terms of we're contributing to EBITDA or we're contributing to the top line or the bottom line in some form or other. So when we define that, we ask the business to sign off on that incrementality. So we're less, I mean, the whole security side and the governance side is the table stakes. The sign off on value is more on the incremental side for the business to sign off on. So, and the other thing that we noticed, David, is as we think about the business units, we have a lot of different business units. The value that we're seeing in the data is within the silos. Actually, if you connect the dots through the value chain and you start looking at, each department does their own thing and optimizes their own thing, but actually within each of those departments and within those silos is a tremendous amount of value. So we're just focused on that element, and in that in its own has tremendous value. And so that's where we're focused on in terms of value recognition.
In the face of competition, Dak, and of course we're seeing, whether it's energy and across so many other sectors as well, competition, organizations, companies spinning up using new technologies, finding new routes to market. How do you keep on innovating around things, not just around your core offering, but around how you do that more efficiently, around business models, around revenue models? And then how do you bridge the gap to make sure that technology's got a seat at the table? When NRG is making the big decisions about the 5-year plan, the 2-year plan, about new territories, new areas to try and exploit. How do you make sure that tech is in those conversations and isn't just somewhere down the corridor waiting for a knock at the door with the directives in hand?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. And really, it starts with the corporate strategy. And so I, as part of the executive team, are involved in the annual corporate strategy process, the strategic planning process, so that we start to home in on our priorities for the next few years. And from that, and once we understand the business unit objectives, we build out our own technology strategy. So we have our own set of goals, measures, strategies for the 5 years. We build out our own roadmaps that are fed from the business roadmaps and the business priorities. And then what then happens is we take that, we move to a product operating model. So the business and the technology groups are working together, and we do quarterly planning to make sure now what we're building in that quarter is achieving what the business is trying to do as part of the strategic plan, their strategic plan. So you see a top down all the way through to doing the work in terms of the agile teams. There's a thread that falls all the way through, and that's how we make sure we're aligned with the business.
I was going to say the agile plan in there for sure, and those more regular checkpoints. And I guess that's the thing, and a conversation I've been having with a number of, CIOs, CTOs as well, is that habit almost of, or that history of the annual plan, usually September, October, coming up with a plan for the following year. Actually, by the time December's come along, before that plan's even got signed off, so much has changed that makes that plan something other than useful. So having those more regular check-ins and the product operating model that you're talking about there sounds as though it's a very sensible approach.
Exactly. David, the only other thing I would say to that is so much is being enabled by technology and AI and data that if you talk to our CEO, for example, technology and strategy is so closely linked because they need to be so close together, because you can't really do one without the other effectively these days, unless you're going to you're going to put even putting a man on the moon requires some kind of technology, but
right,
there's a lot of technology and enablement on pretty much everybody's strategy. So that's why it's so critical that we're closely aligned.
And I guess, there's a lot of energy around AI at the moment, as we've touched on, but AI itself requires a lot of energy. And I know it's a whole different conversation, but of course, providing the infrastructure required to power our digital future and employing some of the AI tools, you need the AI to power the AI almost. You could go so far as to say.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And if you look at some of our AI models, we actually take the demand of the markets. We have 15-minute interval data. We start to understand what's the load. Our business is massively impacted by weather. So we take decades of weather data to kind of look at, well, how should we predict the future? We take those models to look at what are the price curves of how much would electricity cost? How much will it cost for us to burn for or use gas, for example, to generate electricity? What's the market doing in terms of prices? Are we hedging? Are we hedging or trading? Are we long? Are we short? All of those together, and we run big AI models, will then tell us, should we generate more or should we buy more off the market? And so it really drives our hedging strategies. And you start to see, certainly in our models and our AI models of multi-year out, you can start to see that demand growth. And we already saw that last year. And whether it's data centers and AI or whether it's pure electrification, more people have electric cars. There's a natural need for more. There is a higher consumption need of power.
Yeah, and certainly since my family's switched to electric vehicles here in Europe, boy, we're far more plugged in to how much energy electricity in particular is costing us. And pleased to say that energy providers are finding new and interesting ways of engaging with consumers, because that's all in this game I am. But whether it is free energy on a Sunday afternoon because the wind is high or something like that, that engages the public and helps us all to appreciate the challenges that, and I guess just the way that energy companies like NRG have to operate. It's opened my eyes over the last few years, I have to say.
Yeah, and even if you think about the demand, how do you curtail demand? The cleanest megawatt of energy is the one you don't use. So there is a need for more generation, but actually, can we be smarter in how we use energy and at what point in the day do we use it? So we've worked, we have a strategic partnership with some of the ex-Nest guys and it's a company called Renew Home. They're still part of Google, around how you create micro shifting in the home. So, when it gets warm, actually, what should we be looking at? Yes, you can turn in the US, everybody has HVACs, AC conditioning. So that obviously is a lot of electricity. Can we be smarter with that? But also, as you think about your fridge uses a lot of energy. So could we be smarter with that? Can we be smarter with solar? And as battery technology comes into the home, shifting between different sources of energy at different times to reduce that need on the grid and being more cost effective for the consumer as well.
It's a endlessly fascinating area, and thank you for chatting us through, I guess, that delivery point of view, but also the nuts and bolts, how the electrons move through NRG and the role that you play in making them move as well. Thank you very much indeed, Dak. But not going to let you go quite yet. We've got some questions that we put to all of our guests at the end of the show. And the show's called CXO Secrets. So I have to ask, Dak, what is your secret? If you were to put your modesty to one side for a moment, tell us what key attribute has enabled you to do what you do today.
I would say it's been to be authentic and humble in terms of how I deliver and give the message across, and to listen and be curious. We have our values within NRG, and I'm an advocate of be curious, because regardless of even from me that's moved from retail to hospitality to energy, the underlying themes are exactly the same: supply, demand, forecasting, pricing, all of personalization. All of those are the same. But if you are authentic in how you ask questions, you are curious, and then you start formulating plans and take the business and along with you in the journey, and it is a journey, I think you get a lot more buy-in, and a lot more in terms of the change that you're doing. I always say to people, when they ask me what are the things that will slow you down when I go into an organization, I say two things: technology and culture. And you have to manage both of those in a way that says, I'm going to deliver as much value as I can. There's a lot of change, and there's a lot of advocacy and taking people along with me. So I have to do that in an authentic voice.
And finally, Dak, what question would you like me to put to a guest on a future episode of CXO Secrets?
Yes, sure. So I think we talked about AI and Gen AI. Now, there's a tremendous amount of excitement from the business of what it can do, or the potential. And what I'd love to understand from your next guest is how you set expectations within the business as to what you can deliver and when, and the value that it can bring. Because there's a lot of hype, and you have to ground the organizations in the reality and where that organization is in its life cycle.
There is a lot of hype, and there's a lot of value to be found there. That's a great question. I look forward to asking it, and stay tuned for the answer. Dak, it's been great to speak with you today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on CXO Secrets.
Fantastic, David. Thank you for having me.